Welcome to I Could Talk to You All Day. I'm Lauren Lefkowitz, recovering workaholic, perfectionist, and people pleaser.
And I'm John Spears, emerging from playing small, getting caught up in the inertia of life, and always being on.
I Could Talk to You All Day is a show for executives and emerging leaders. This is not just another leadership podcast. We're here to talk about what it means to be a leader while also being human.
So join us for raw, vulnerable, and probably pretty funny conversations about shifting from surviving at work and home to thriving in the life you've always wanted. Let's get the conversation started. Hey, Lauren, what's up? How you doing?
Hey, John, how's it going?
It's going super well.
Excellent.
How are you?
I'm really good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We've talked about this over and over on our calls that we've done, our podcast or recordings, this idea of like things being good and still like not fitting in the typical construct of good. Like things can be going well in our lives, and yet they can be challenges, there can be frustrations. And I feel like when I'm like, hey, I'm doing super well, at least today, there's lots of stuff going on. There's lots of transition happening, lots of unknown stuff. And yet things are still going okay. They're still going well. And it's a huge shift for me, who in the past would, if things were frustrating or challenging or hard, that experience would like consume my being or my whole psyche, and I'd be weighed down by it. So just to throw that there, I don't know if you have anything or that same experience or a similar experience.
I am super familiar with that experience. In fact, this morning I was in tears on an appointment with my therapist. And now I'm like, I'm having a great day. Like I have an ability to let go now that I didn't used to have the capacity for, that is different from my former ability to numb.
Yeah.
So in the past, if I had had a hard therapy appointment or a bad morning or something in my life or my career wasn't going the way that I wanted it to, I call it my backpack of crap. I would put it in my backpack of crap, push it all the way down to the bottom, and pile all the stuff I needed to get done on top of it. And eventually your backpack runs out of room and it's overflowing, and everything that's crappy starts to come into everything else. And so the balance of what feels good for me didn't feel good. And now the balance of things, and I think this is true for you too, and kind of what you were saying, is that overall, everything's pretty great. I'm going to have hard calls with my therapist. I'm going to have hard calls with my coach. I'm going to have days where just like everything goes wrong and I'm frustrated all day. But most of the time, I'm just pretty happy.
Yeah.
And that is really different and a product of very hard, very worthwhile work.
Yeah. If you knew me, you know that I'm a sucker from like inspirational Instagram. Like I love all the little like inspirational things, the challenging things, the like, music with like words on the screen with the ocean lapping in the background. Totally am a sucker for that stuff. And I remember seeing one of those things and it was like, are you having a bad day or did you just have a hard conversation? Are you having a bad week or did you have one challenging moment? And I found, like, as I've been on this personal growth journey and really working on myself and elevating my consciousness, that those experiences, I have a hard conversation or a hard thing, it doesn't consume me. To your point, I don't put it in my backpack and like lug it the rest of the day, week, month, year, like I used to in the past. And that shift, that ability for something both good or challenging to happen and it to be flat and just to be there as opposed to carrying it forward, it's like a huge thing. And it's totally changed my experience in my life in such a really amazing way.
One of the big lessons for me has been to stop pushing the things down and to choose to wallow or to choose to be frustrated or choose to be angry so that it can go through me. because I saw a similar Instagram post, also a sucker for all of those. That person said, did you have a bad day or did you have a bad 5 minutes and you're carrying it with you?
Yeah.
And I think it's okay to carry it with you so it can move through you. Otherwise, you're just carrying it with you forever.
Totally.
So I choose wallow days. I'm going to be angry today or I'm going to be sad today all day. I'm just going to let myself have a bad day. And then it will be better after that. Instead of numbing it and trying to like fight it so hard and look at myself in the mirror and grit my teeth and say like, it's like, it's not, it's not how it works, Lauren. Still telling myself that, but that's not how it works. That's not, you don't just get over things. You have to process them. You have to let them go through you. And I've seen both of us work incredibly hard to allow that instead of trying to bright side ourselves or put ourselves down or get angry at ourselves for getting angry at ourselves and all of those kinds of things.
Yeah. I mean, this is not exactly what we're going to be talking about today, but I think it really ties in nicely. It sounds like we're talking a little bit about like resistance and resisting things that are happening in our lives or experiences. And once we accept them and allow things to move through us and us to be able to move on, we find ourselves having a breakthrough. And what we're talking about today is getting unstuck. And what does it mean to be stuck? How does it feel to be stuck? And how do we get unstuck? And I found in the past, I was stuck. And I was stuck for a long time on very different levels and varying different degrees of stuckness. And I want to share, when it comes to it, a little bit about my story of how I got into coaching, because it was all about me having a stuck experience and being able to move through that in a really powerful way that totally changed every level of my life. It was pretty impactful for me.
Yeah. Share it.
Yeah. You want me to share it? Okay.
Yeah, bring it.
So this is how I got into coaching. It was a few years ago. I was in my day job. Things were changing without a lot of conversation about it. It was really unintentional, and sort of things were just moving and the dynamics were just shifting. And I found myself being really frustrated, and to the point of anger, and to the point of kind of living in that space for, days and weeks and months. And I had been stuck before, but maybe it was like a week I was stuck. I couldn't get out of it. I couldn't kind of mentally, intellectually figure out how to get out of something. But I was stuck for like months, and I just couldn't seem to find my footing. I couldn't seem to get perspective. I couldn't seem to kind of get out of the cycle of frustration leading to deeper frustration, leading to anger, leading to sadness, leading to more frustration. And it wasn't like a sort of a depression or anxiety, which, a lot of us go through and have cycles of that. This was just more of I can't figure out how to change my experience. And, I was at that time, I was like a 39, 40-year-old professional, had worked in really incredible places, had been very, very successful. And for the first time in my life, couldn't figure it out myself. And so I had, been in therapy for a really long time. That wasn't helping. That wasn't getting to some of the challenges I was having. And so I decided to hire a coach. And that coach, through that just simple 3-month engagement, totally helped me shift my perspective. And we talk a lot about the difference between content and context. The content is like the stuff that's happening in our lives. Right now, the content is me and you having a conversation on Zoom that's being recorded, that's going to be put out there in the world. And the context is how I'm viewing this experience, how I'm seeing it, how I'm interpreting it, the narrative that I'm kind of telling myself about it. And so I had made my stuckness mean that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't successful, that I was just like not worth it, that I just couldn't figure it out. And also just shifted and really influenced my relationships with people that were really close to me. And so anyway, through this engagement, I was able to really identify the way in which I was seeing the world, the lens that I had on this experience, and was able to get unstuck. And what I like to call, getting elevation, or being able to see above the forest and the thickness that happens. We're in we're in a wooded space mentally. And that feeling of unstuck was like the first time in my life that I had felt this kind of liberation and this feeling. And it was just, I was like hooked. It was like, oh my goodness, I can shift my life just by my mindset. I can, if I see something differently, or I'm more open or more curious about it, that's going to like change my whole experience of something. And so it was just remarkable for me. And I'm really grateful for having that experience, because like I said, I was like 40 and I'd never been challenged in the way that I was challenged. And it's just an incredibly transformative experience for me.
The phrase that sticks the most with me in what you just said is, I couldn't figure it out for myself, which is super frustrating when you're a high achieving, successful human being, right? It's, how can I not figure it out? It's must not be figure outable.
If I can't figure it out. Totally.
Right. I was super in that place. I was in my career working 1 billion hours a week with no end in sight. And the first coach I hired told me it was going to be that way as long as I wanted it to be that way. And I was furious. And I also recognized in her language, the way she said it was, if you say so, when I told her what I couldn't change, I recognized in her language that was language I used with my own clients. So here I was. And for me, the big shift was that I was living like a chosen martyr life. I can have the satisfaction of helping other people find their joy, their path, their future, their success. It's not in the cards for me. I can't have it. And I couldn't have it because I said I couldn't have it. And I am great evidence, and I think you are too, of getting so lost in what I was doing for other people, what I really perceived to be doing for other people, that was in the interest of me finding my internal value in external ways. So I thought if I worked hard enough and pleased enough people and cared enough and was compassionate enough and of service enough, that eventually I would feel good about myself. And instead, I just stayed stuck in my own life because I didn't make the time to get myself unstuck until I did.
Until you did. So I would love to hear from you what your experience of feeling stuck is, or being stuck, either your own personal experience or as a coach, some of the clients that you work with. When someone's stuck, what does that feel like? What is the experience? What's sort of happening in our lives or in our minds or in our bodies around that stuckness, that feeling of being stuck?
For me, there was a lot of creating facts. Let me restate that. There was a lot of creating truths that were not facts, right? The fact is the weather is 78 degrees today. The fact is at some point today, the sun will set, right? Those are facts. I created truths, and from beliefs. Whatever we believe becomes the truth. If I believe what I cannot do, I am correct. And there certainly are things that, like, for me, defy physics, and therefore I will not be able to do. But there were a lot of things that I had decided I couldn't do or couldn't have. And as humans, we do things to have things so we can be happy. And I never thought about how I was being through all of the doing. So in feeling stuck, to get back to your original question, instead of off track into a whole other episode, how I knew I was stuck was that I always dreaded my day. I went from a career that I thoroughly enjoyed, no matter how many hours I was working, for 15 years, to year 15 and 1 day, where I hated it. And I didn't want to hate it because I'd loved it for so long. So I kept fighting to love it instead of trying to change it. I kept fighting to be happy where I felt stuck. And I already was living with chronic illness. I was getting sicker because I extended my stress levels to levels I'd never experienced before. And when I knew I was really stuck was, and some of our listeners know that 4.5 years ago, I broke both of my shoulders and I was out of work for almost 4 months. And when I went back with my self-promise that I wouldn't go back to these crazy hours and hand raising for everything, I had no plan. So this idea was just a wish. I went right back to it and I thought I was right. I am stuck here and this is just the way things are.
Mm-hmm.
And it was devastating. So I felt like I always had a lump in my throat. I always had tension in my head. I always felt like this stinks. I guess I'll just be happy when I retire. And so it was this combination of thoughts and body sensations that just had me feeling like, well, this is the life I built. How about you? Well, what's been your experience with like getting into that really stuck spot?
Yeah, well, I mean, I like to think of any time I'm having an experience, both what I would label positive or challenging or negative. I like to think about three things. What's happening in my body? What are my body sensations? What's happening in my thoughts? And what's happening in my behaviors? So I would say, like, in my body, you mentioned it, really just tense, a lump in my throat, discomfort, something, that feeling in your body of like you want to get out of your skin. That just, there's like this tension, there's just like this, like, oh, this is just not working for me. So that's kind of the physical experience that I had, just lots of frustration. I also, when I was really stuck, was like really tired, fatigued all the time. There's a lot of kind of similarities to the whole like burnout feeling of just like not feeling like I could sort of like get it going and getting it together. So in my body, that was the experience. In my thoughts, it was super kind of those thoughts that were not empowering. So like, oh, you're doing it again, really disempowering thoughts. Thoughts of like, well, you're not going to be able to fix this. Like you're too into this. You're too far deep into it that you're never going to be able to crawl yourself out of this hole. So again, super disempowering thoughts. And then from a behavior perspective, I found myself repeating patterns that I knew were not serving me. Like I just kept on. I would go in my day and say, here's this, this dynamic with this person that's frustrating. And I would just do those same things. I would just kind of automatically respond or react rather, in a way that, I just fundamentally knew was not going to serve me or get the kind of result that I wanted to get. And all of those three things together, if you can imagine, is just a really awful whole experience, like whole body experience. When you're kind of swirling in your mind, when you're doing things that you just know are not serving you, it has two results that I found. One is it can get you further into the downward cycle and kind of doing those behaviors, saying those things more, feeling worse and worse and worse. Or you can realize and make a choice of, none of these things are serving me anymore. I want a different experience. I want to go in a different direction. I kind of want to like put the brakes on going down this way and do a U-turn. And there's a lot of inertia in that, right? There's a lot of, just like gravity, when you're kind of spiraling down and moving in that direction, lots of momentum going that way. And it takes a real choice and a decision to say, enough of this. I am going to begin to think differently. I'm going to begin to make my mindset differently. And I'm going to choose to do things that are going to make my body and my experience feel different.
I heard in there indirectly a distinction of inertia, which is just sort of going along, right? With like the devastation of feeling it.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that a little bit more of like the difference for you, the distinction of just going along for the ride versus actually feeling the stuckness?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, a lot of my life was going in the inertia. I would let kind of like, days, weeks, months, years pass without living with any sort of intentionality. Oh, this is the day. I'm just gonna, wake up in the morning, look at my calendar, go through my work day, and it's like over. And then the same thing at night, sort of what was happening personally. And I think for me, when there's a little bit of discomfort, or when you begin to cultivate awareness, that's when I began to see the devastating effects of the kind of the life that I was living, or that I was allowing to happen, or the mindset. And so I think for me, the first step in this whole thing is creating space for awareness in our lives, and asking ourselves, is this serving me? I'm having this experience. What is this experience about? And I think, awareness coupled with curiosity, with, okay, I'm having this experience. I knew that I wasn't happy, right? I knew that when I look back at that early part of me being stuck, even in the early days, I kind of knew something was off. Like I knew something wasn't working, but I wasn't curious about it. I think one of the elements that I think about a real kind of experience that I've had around being stuck is it's absolutes. There's kind of like, this is the only way to think about this. This is the only way to do something. This is my experience that I'm having now. And it's the only experience that I can have. And I'm really hurt by this, or I'm really, this person's really putting me off. So I'm going to choose to have this experience. And I think once I was like, I wonder, to your point, I wonder if the story I'm telling myself is fact or interpretation. Am I interpreting things a certain way that's causing me to have this experience? Or are these real facts? I think once I began to question myself, and to, I don't love the word interrogate, but really kind of ask myself hard questions, and not give myself an easy pass. That's when I became aware of things more, and began to become more curious about, is there a different way to look at this?
Mm-hmm.
I at work, a lot of people say this phrase all the time, and it's like, where you sit is where you stand. Like you only have one point of view, and so shifting that, sitting in a different seat, and maybe not making a ton of assumptions about another point of view or an experience, can be really liberating in expanding our view of something and the experience that we can have.
Yeah. The idea of starting from curiosity is something so many of us forget, and we get into this stuck place because we don't even notice that we're not curious.
Mm-hmm.
So standing up and moving to a different part of the metaphorical room, or physically, right? Like coming and moving your desk to a different spot, or sitting on the other side of the couch, or just coming from a different perspective can really help you see. And I think for both of us, there was some shift, and we both identified our shifts, that made us recognize that we did not want to be where we were.
Yeah.
And that was, for me, that was step one. And step two was recognizing that someone else could help me with it.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of ego for me in thinking in a self-centered way, frankly, that I'm pretty freaking smart.
You are.
If I can't figure it out, it must not be solvable, because I can figure out everybody else's stuff.
Yeah.
Whether it's through consulting, training, just fixing stuff, whether it's through coaching, I have a lot of confidence in my ability to help other people see themselves in their stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought if I couldn't do that for myself, it simply could not be done. And I think a lot of us think that. And some of it comes from ego, and some of it comes from that stuckness and hopelessness of that things got to this place. You've gotten to near the front of the line in the amusement park ride, and you're not going to quit now.
Mm-hmm.
This is the path you chose. That we think there's no other choice. So I basically needed to be like smacked in the face with, you're choosing this, Lauren, in a way that out clevered my own too smart for my own goodness, you know? And I read a quote yesterday or the day before that was a George Bernard Shaw quote that said, life is not about finding yourself. Life is about creating yourself. And I thought, that's what I've done now.
Yeah.
And I used to have this inkling that somewhere in there was the self I wanted to be, but it was buried by all this busyness. And the truth is that I can never have imagined this version of myself. I was talking to you about my rock before we got on this recording. I have a grounding rock now.
Your grounding rock, yeah.
Grounding rock now, right? And it fits my hand perfectly. And I was showing you how it fit my hand perfectly. 5 years ago, me would have been like, that's nice for you, weirdo. And I'm exploring all aspects of myself and aspects that I didn't know could exist because I've stepped out of my own way and I've decided not to be stuck in the way things were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned something that really resonated with me, and that was asking for help. And I found that pre asking for help, I was stuck a lot more than post asking for help. This idea before that I can do it all, that I have all the answers, that I'm completely self-sufficient and I can just power through something on my own, I think perpetuated this experience of being stuck, as opposed to now, things in all areas of my life shifted when I asked for help. When I hired a coach and I said, I cannot do this. I have come to the end of all my tools. The white knuckling it, the kind of powering through it just isn't working anymore. What got me here is not going to get me to where I need to go. And I need a new set of tools, a new perspective, a new approach to making it happen. And, since you're a coach and since you've had your own experience of getting unstuck, what are 3 or 4 things that you do with your clients or with yourself to help getting unstuck into moving through a breakthrough and having the experience that we want to have in life?
It was 2 major things: paying people to help me and trusting my friends to help me. So I'll talk about paying people to help me first, because I went through my adult life and career thinking that you only paid people to help you if you were sick, which included mental health, included therapy. Or like if you couldn't do it on your own, like the time I had my shower explode on me because I was trying to fix my own plumbing. And then I called a plumber and I realized you should call a plumber for water. And so I thought paying people to do things was necessity. And I didn't recognize that getting unstuck would become necessity. And now I will continue to pay for my own personal professional development for the rest of my life because I don't ever want to stop growing. We're not taught to invest in ourselves unless we need a certification or a license or a degree or something like that. And then we look and see if our company will pay for it. And, we look around for the external validation, whether it's financial or otherwise, that we should do it. I have never changed so much in all of the years of my life as I did from the day I hired my first coach until today. And so that was the first thing, was deciding to invest my own money, a lot of it, in my own development in order to change my life. The other thing was trusting my friends. And I've always had a handful of very trusted friends who I've known I can count on, one of whom I became friends with at age 12. So I'm in for the longevity of friendships. And also, I would sprinkle in what I felt was my burdensome stuff. I was always there for their stuff, and they knew that. And they were there for my stuff, but I didn't ask for it. I said I'm cool a lot of the time, until I was really feeling like I was breaking. And then I was calling in tears. I have learned to trust my friends along the way, to trust that I will be listened to, I will be received with compassion, that I'm not going to be looked at as like, wow, that's weird. I've never heard of anybody having that. I've had enough of, those experiences in my life medically. So to know that I don't have that with friends, that if I'm calling a friend with an issue, they're not going to be like, wow, you're weird, is a real comfort and can be really constructive. So for me, that combination of the two, of the friends that I can rely on and investing in my own coaches and mentors and advisors, and is so productive for me and has been absolutely life-changing, because I cannot get out of my own way sometimes. And
Totally.
I need somebody to be like, you've said that like 4 times. What's happening there? Why do you keep repeating that particular statement? I'm not noticing it. My friend is noticing it, or my coach is noticing it. And then I can work through it and be constructive about it, or decide to wallow in it, right? Like I have choice. I'm always in choice. But those are really the major things for me. How about for you?
I think there are 3 things that I think about for myself and when I'm working with clients around getting unstuck. The first is the realization for me that ego equals lots of pain. And when I'm trying to be right, when I'm trying to justify myself or make myself feel this idea that like my way is the only way, or this is the only perspective, or that I have to be perfect, all of that is for me swirling around ego. And when I'm in ego, I inevitably experience lots of pain, lots of frustration, lots of stuckness, because in that is resistance and like self-preservation. So that's like kind of the first thing, is to be aware of that and recognize that. The second thing I do and I work with clients to do is get elevation, to really kind of see things from a different vantage point. When we're walking a really thick forest or wooded area, it's really hard to see clearly. It's hard because there's thick, brush above us. There could be some vines, metaphorically, there can be lots of brush on the floor. You're kind of slowed down by like the stuff around you. And it's only until you can kind of like get out of that we can see clearly. So the other, that is sort of second, is get elevation, kind of see things from a different perspective. And the third is, and we have this sort of exercise in coaching or a tool called the clearing exercise, which is really about seeing things as they are, instead of kind of getting falling into a certain narrative or a story that we're telling ourselves, and really living in interpretation. The third is around getting to a clear place where we can create our own meaning. And I found that when I've been able to recreate meaning around an experience or something that's happening in my life, that really liberates me to think differently, to experience things differently. And it's only when I choose to interpret things and believe things are a certain way, they have to be this way, that I experience that stuckness. And so I would say the 3 things that I work on myself all the time: really identifying ego. Where's ego getting in the way of things? The second is get some elevation, get a different perspective. If it's physically, get a different perspective. I know for me, when I'm really frustrated or in a stuck place, I need to move. Taking a walk, getting outside, getting in a different physical space as well as mental space could be really, really helpful in making that shift. And the third is creating new meaning out of a new experience, and really thinking about the different ways for you to do that, I think, is really helpful. And, as we do with our clients, there's lots of tools and exercises and inquiries that you can have around those things. But I think these are the 3 kind of really reliable things that I do in my own life when I'm feeling stuck or like I can't get out of my own way.
Yeah. I love that you gave tactical tools for things to actually do. When I didn't know how to handle my stuff, I sat still. And there is so much value in whatever movement you, your body, your time can tolerate, that I've started doing some somatic exercises.
Yeah.
And they're really powerful. And one of them is just shaking out your body, just like starting with your hands. And you can't see this if you're listening, but just shaking out your hands at the wrists wiggling your fingers and then moving up your arms and into your whole body and kicking out your feet. Just moving the energy helps you get unstuck enough to even think about what you're trying to get unstuck from.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of times when we feel stuck, we feel like it's such a big stuck that we're just here. This is just how it is. And if we can break it down into small steps, we can break it down into just move, or just call somebody, or just tell somebody, or just write it down. If you can start with a thing, then you're on a path to getting unstuck.
Totally.
Yeah.
Lauren, I could talk to you all day about this and everything else. Before we hop off, what's one takeaway from today's conversation that you would want to leave our listeners with?
I think the takeaway is we always have a choice. Even when we forget we have a choice, we have a choice. And we're not responsible for knowing what that is. We're responsible for deciding to make a choice.
I love that.
How about for you?
Mine would be asking for help.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's through friends or professionally, coming to the place where there's a recognition of needing help is, I think, a really powerful way to surrender and to be humble and to open up yourself to make the kind of changes and the choices that you need to make to get unstuck.
Amazing.
Well, thanks for this conversation, Lauren. It's always such a joy and a pleasure to connect with you. And thanks everyone for listening.
We're so grateful you decided to be with us during this episode. Subscribe, rate, and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues, and join us next time for more Real Talk.